Alright, so some supplies that you should consider using. A Shamrock horseshoe charm, and you can see on this one, I'll show it up close, this one is got openings around in between the horseshoe, so you'll need something that's perforated like this if you're not going to do these. And the one place I didn't see them in gold, but I did see them in silver, and that was over at nostalgica.com. So they had a pair of charms that were these in silver. And then I'm just going to start pushing things out of the way so we can use the table. You're going to need some beading needles, and I'm going to use a size 12. I think you could use a 10 or a 12, but I'm going to use a 12 because the 12 is smaller due to the beads we're using. So the beads are going to be these Miyuki beads, and I'm using, put these in my hand, I'm using the Shamrock green. This is a white with an AB coating, and then I'm using black Miyuki beads, and these are all size 11s. And then I'm using some Miyuki gold, sparkling gold. This is going to be our fringe bead. And then you're going to need some thread. So today I'm trying out this 1G thread. I've heard very good things about 1G, and comes in multiple colors. And we're going to be using this for because you're going to be making multiple passes through the beads, and I'll probably use the greens to start out with. You're going to need some scissors to cut the thread. You may consider getting a little dish so that you can scrape up your leftover seed beads. These are wonderful. Make it easy to scoop up your beads and put them away. And then, of course, something joyful on your table that makes you happy. These are a dish of purple flowers, dried flowers that I had from an arrangement. And I thought they were so pretty. They dried beautifully, and I'm having them on my table. And the other thing we have today is I'm outside, and we have the birds singing. So I'll try not to talk a whole lot, but I do need to tell you what to do. But hopefully in the background you can hear the birds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got one of my charms ready to go, and I'm going to, oh, that was what I was going to tell you. I found this kit colorway. It's got multiple colors of 1G thread from Amazon.com in case you needed some thread. So, excuse me. I think I'm going to go with, I'm looking at the colors, and we can go dark or we can go with this lighter green. And I'm thinking I'm going to go with this lighter green. It looks a little bit closer to this color of the Shamrock green. The Shamrock green Miyuki beads. So I'm going to get my needle threaded, and I'll be back. All right, so I've got my thread all ready, and I have a arm span or a wingspan of length of thread, meaning that I stretch my arms out as wide as I can, and that's where I cut it there, and it's a pretty manageable length of thread. And you can stitch a good amount with it. So I'm going to tie a knot, but I'm going to turn it to the back. So I'm going to work from this side, and I'm going to work around. So let's tie a surgeon's knot around this side. So make sure you're in the camera. And a surgeon's knot is where you do a square knot, and the top part is you do a double, meaning that you're going to bring that thread end, under 2 times. Oops, did I lose it? There we go. Oop, it slipped out. If that happens, you can just push it back under. It's because I had it twisted. All right, so that first part is done, and now we're going to do a second square knot on top of that where the thread just comes under one time. There we go. And I'm just making it tight. And I'm going to push that to the edge so that it's right next to that little lip. That's where we're going to be. All right, now we're ready to pick up our beads. So I'm going to pick up 2 green shamrock beads. So sorry I hit the camera. All right, so I'm picking up 2 shamrock green beads, and I'm going to bring those all the way down through my thread. So some of the good things that I've heard about 1G thread is, 1, it's supposed to resist tangling, and 2, it resists fraying. So that's always a good thing, I think, when you're having to make multiple passes through beads. All right, so here we are. We've got our beads all the way down, and we're going to keep those beads there, and we're going to bring our needle through that opening. Just like so. And I'm going to make sure those beads are sitting on top. And they want to be side by side, like so. I can get my fingers correct. And then I'm going to go take my needle and put it through the first bead. You only want to go through the first bead, that first bead, or the second bead on the horseshoe. Just like that. And they're a little wonky, but you can take your finger and just kind of push them into place, and they'll sit nice together. And then I usually, to help them sit better together, I usually pass through them one more time. Oops, but you don't want to go through the thread. Okay. So I'm going back through that first bead, and then I'm going to come down and go up again through the second bead so that we end there, because that's where we're going to start adding more beads. And then I'm just going to make sure everything's sitting properly. Did I get it right? There we go. And everything's sitting good. That second pass through really helps. So now I'm going to start adding beads. And don't let the shamrock connection points bother you. If you have to add a second wrap around on one opening, you can do that so that it sits properly going all the way around. Let's add another bead. And that bead is going to sit right on top of that second bead. And I'm holding on to it so that I can go back through that window there, through that first part. And I'll move my finger here in just a second. And you see how it pulls down on that bead? You're going to add your needle back through that third bead. I can see. All right. There we go. It helps to hold on to them, and then I'm just going to snug it up right next to those other two beads, and then you can see how I've got my green thread wrapped around the horseshoe part of the charm. So I am going to do one more wrap on this side before I start going to this opening, the second opening near where the Shamrock connects to the horseshoe. So I'm going to pick up another bead and push it all the way down. Going through that first opening of my charm. And I'm going to hold on to those beads like so. And I'm going to pass through that next bead. So. And then that's going to cause that bead to sit nicely next to my other beads. And so you can see, show you here, how my threads are going. Now we're going to start adding in this second chamber here, right there. I'm holding on to it, the thread, and I'm adding my needle through that second chamber. Pulling down like so, and then adding my needle through that bead. Snugging it up. So now that you have the hang of how I'm stitching around the horseshoe, I'm going to go ahead and finish, and I'll show you when I get to the end. I'll be back. All right, how's it going? I'm just checking in. I am getting to the point where I'm going to be finished with my first round. I was going to do one more with you just to check in and show you that you just naturally stitch where those openings are so you can see. Oh, pulled on it. There we go. Get my fingers back in the game. You can see I'm right here. Oops. There we go. Pushing that needle back up through that bead. Like so. You're just naturally stitching around the horseshoe in those openings. All right, I'm going to finish. All right, so I have finished my first round of stitching with the green colored Shamrock seed beads. And I'm just wanting to show you that you can see my stitches, and you can see I just free stitched inside each of those little openings to get my beads around. So now we're going to start the white seed bead layer. These are white seed beads with an AB coating. That's Aurora Borealis, so it has like an iridescent look to it. One thing I also did was the little piece of thread that I had, the shorter thread, I went ahead and just fed in and out of my beads to take care of that, so it won't be in your way when you're stitching back around. All right, so we're going to begin on the second row. And one thing I also wanted to mention is that in the beginning you did not see me use wax on this thread. I'm trying it without it. I read that it's not necessary with this thread, that it already has a coating on it. So I thought that was really awesome. So we're going to turn our work towards us because we're going to do our second row. And also, you should get yourself a piece of chocolate if you like chocolate or whatever you enjoy to reward yourself for finishing your first row. That's always fun. And the birds are very active today, and the frogs are very active today. I hear frogs, I hear the crows. So it's very, very sunshiny day today, and a little getting a little warm. We're coming out of winter, and spring is almost here. So this time when we're starting, I'm going to pick up one bead and pull it all the way down, just as we did when we started. Oops. I want to make sure I'm going this direction now. And I'm going to get this as close as I can so you can see. We want to put our needle, this is called a thread bridge. So we are going to put our needle through that first thread bridge where we connected the first row of beads. And that is how you add your second row. And I'm going to pull my thread all the way down. So, and again, holding on to that thread to push all the way up through to make my connection. I'm so sorry, I hit the stem of my camera arm, and I'm just going to pull that. Make sure that that's nice and there we go. Like so. All right, so now I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to bead on this one. It's going to be the same thing where you keep adding beads and threading through your thread bridges to make the connections. But the interesting part on this one, let's see, can hear the crows. Very active. And if it gets a little twisted like that, just use your needle to pull it into place so that you can add your needle back through the bead. Get my fingers out of the way. Like so. There we go. So the interesting thing about this row is that you may have to add beads as you go around on one thread bridge, because you're going to get to the point where, and when you're coming around, there's more space. So I'll show you that when we get there. If I can get my beads. And I'm just going to keep on stitching, and when we get to that point, I will show you why you need to add an extra bead. All right, so I have been stitching along, and I wanted to check in with you and show you how far I am. And just to point out, so far I don't have any gaps in the spacings of my beads. Sometimes, depending on the size and the shape of the bead that you use, there can be gaps. I will keep a lookout as I stitch, but right now I have not seen any gaps. What you would do, sometimes curves can cause that, and so you would just add another bead. So say I'm stitching here, and there's a wider space between this bead and the next bead that you would sew. you could come back under the same thread bridge and add another bead. My beads are a little bit larger in size than my first beads. They're 11s, but they have a round shape to them instead of the barrel shape that's like these first ones, than this first row. You could add another bead under that first thread, that thread bridge, and they would sit right next to each other, and it would prevent a spacing, a larger spacing between your beads. Keep in mind that happens a lot when you're working in the round or on curves. All right, I'm going to finish. I'll be back. All right, so here we are. We have finished round 2. We are stitching around this horseshoe shamrock charm. And now we're going to begin the 3rd round, which is a black round, and then we're going to add fringe to it. So we're going to turn our piece this way, and we're going to pick up a bead, and it's going to be the same technique as you did before, where you're adding the bead and you're using that thread bridge right here, the thread bridge, to connect the bead with the thread. So let me grab a bead here. So these black beads are a little smaller, and so I am anticipating where we're going to have to add some extra beads to the thread bridges. So when we get to that, if we get to that issue, I'll show you. So here we go. Got my bead on there. I'm going to feed this through that first thread bridge, as so. And same thing, we're going to bring our thread up through the bead, just like that. Nice connection. I love that. Okay. Adding another bead, pulling it down. And we're going to go through the next thread bridge. And you can see I've had enough thread with the wingspan length that I'm able to do all 3 rounds without having to change my thread. We are going to change the thread for the gold, I think, because I want to get a fresh round of thread. And also to make sure we've got enough to do the fringe. All right, and we're going to keep doing this technique, and if I encounter where I'm going to add other beads to the same thread bridge, I will come back and show you. All right, so I am encountering the situation I've been talking to you about. So you see on my piece where there's that large gap, that is what I was talking about. My beads aren't sitting, see how these are all sitting snug next to each other? And this one, all of a sudden, I've got a large gap. I want them to be snug and right next to each other. So let me undo it and I'll show you how I'm fixing it. All right, so I undid the last stitch and I'm adding a bead. I'm going to bring it all the way down. Take this out of the way. and I'm going to place my needle through that same thread bridge as the previous bead. So let me see. You want to come back under as well. And this will bridge the gap that was created so that you have beads that sit next to one another. Oops. And I only do that when I have a gap, and that helps the beads sit next to one another, like so. And then you can continue on stitching. If you encounter any other gaps, add a bead to that same thread bridge as you already added, and that will close it up. All right, I'm going to continue. All right, so I'm on my last bead, getting ready to add my last bead to this last round. And I wanted to show you how to finish off when you're done stitching. So that's the end, and I feel like I don't like to leave a knot here, so I'm going to come down. Make sure I'm in the camera. So I'm going to come down back through this one bead, and I'm just going to, if I can pull it back through. Did I get stuck? Okay. That was a little tight there. So I'm finishing off this. Making sure my bead's sitting correctly still. All right. So there's a few different ways you could finish this, but I'm just going to take my thread and I'm just going to do a square knot around the thread that is feeding through these two beads, or this little section here. And the way that I do that is I want to come through one, and I'm going to leave a little loop on this side, making sure I'm in the camera. I'm going to leave a little loop, and I'm going to come back around the other side, pulling that thread all the way through so that it's like that. And then I'm just going to feed my needle through that loop. And this way it hides your loop under that bead. And you don't have a big old knot hanging out. And then I'm just going to come up through this bead. Oh, sorry, I did not mean to hit you. Hit the camera. Oh. All right. Lost my. So that way my knot is inside there. And then I'm just going to feed it in and out of my beads. Jeez, so sorry. I'm looking and trying to see my hands at the same time. I apologize. All right. Making sure that I'm in the camera too. And I'm just going to feed my thread in and out. And some people, they like to go all the way around, or you can just, make sure that you're, maybe halfway. It's up to you. But that is it for this part one. We are going to be adding some fringe to that's going to be part two. So that's why we went ahead and finished this. And then once you've fed it through a few times, you can clip it away and get rid of it. But I want to make sure that I have enough thread for the fringe, because I don't think it's a good idea to stop and start thread in the middle of the fringe. So we're going to add another wingspan of the thread, and we will do that in part two. Thank you so much for watching and being here with me, and I hope you are having a happy day. If you enjoyed the video today, could you give it a like, thumbs up, and a subscribe? I would love, love, love that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and come back and see us for part two, adding fringe. Thanks.